Welcome everyone to our VWEC Metaverse Expert Series. We're really glad to see you and have you join us today for our amazing presentation and discussion. Everyone is also invited to attend an extended chat with our speaker at the other end of the deck for an informal conversation or a Q&A after the presentation. So for those who are new, here is our website. I'm putting it into the chat, and you can find VWEC on many different social media channels, and here's another URL for all of those. And after our presentation, again, we will have some extended discussion. So today, we are pleased to offer the Expert Series presentation in chat. We're having a little bit of an issue with our streaming today, so if we get that going, we will go ahead and put it into the local chat once we get that link. Otherwise, this should be on YouTube later on. You can also, and speaking of signs here, you can see that I have a survey plant right next to me. And this is just a quick survey that is going to be really helpful for us. If you could fill it out to let us know, and let us know how you found us, and feel free to send any comments you might have. So again, I'm happy to introduce our Metaverse Expert Series, Meryl McBride. Meryl, also known as Meryl Johnson, will be our presenter. She's a professor of geography who's recently retired, sort of, I guess, at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. And she has extensive experience in virtual world education and in writing about space, place, and identity in social virtual worlds. So she will be presenting on the virtual world, place, and their pedagogical expressions. Take it away, Meryl.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for coming. And it's a pleasure to be here, even though it's sort of short notice. But this is one of my favorite subjects. I like to talk about virtual world identity and place. At any rate, my name is Meryl McBride, professor of geography, recently retired at CSU. I'm also retired from Louisiana Higher Education as the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs and a Professor of Geography at the University of New Orleans. So I'm a double retiree. While I'm an economic and political geographer by training, I developed a keen interest in social virtual worlds, their people, identities, and places about 20 years ago. It is a pleasure to be with you today to talk about virtual places in education. Although full disclosure, this is a somewhat abbreviated version of a talk that I gave to Science Circle about 2 years ago. The purpose of this talk is to share with you ideas about the geographer's conceptualization of place, how place is expressed in social virtual worlds, and the extent to which virtual world places may offer enhanced learning opportunities. Pursuant to this purpose, I have 3 main objectives: to examine theoretically the concept of place as it has been developed by geographers over recent decades, to adapt the geographical conceptualization of place to the social virtual world setting, reflecting on similarities and differences between the two worlds, and to discuss how these adaptations may be used to create so-called pedagogical places that build on the strengths of the social virtual world. I will focus on geographical instruction, which makes sense given my academic calling. Let me confess up front that I am borrowing substantially from a book that I published in 2022 on social virtual worlds and their places, A Geographer's Guide. Substantial other scholarly work, of course, is also included. Each avatar functions in space, albeit electronic in nature, and each occupies various places in that space. Yes, on some level, the avatar is still tethered to the physical world, but look around you in this room. Our spaces and places are very authentic, very, shall we say, normal. Of course, not everybody agrees about how normal or real places in a virtual setting can be. Tim Creswell, a highly respected humanist geographer, remarked in 2015 that what we would call virtual places, quote, seem disembodied, overly passive, and unreal, end quote, and we're eradicating or radically transforming the concept of place. Wow. Tom Bolstorff, on the other hand, a cultural anthropologist and a leading authority on social virtual worlds, provided a competing perspective when he remarked that, quote, place above all else makes virtual worlds what they are. With all due respect to Professor Creswell, it seems that the study of space, place, and interaction by geographers should not be discarded as virtual world entities worthy of serious study. With that claim in mind, let's look at some of the major geographical ideas about place. There is a substantial literature in geography on what a place is, not all of which is consistent in terms of approach and conclusions. In the early days, geographers relied on a descriptive approach that essentially asked, what is that map setting like? Later, geographers focused on a more social constructionist approach that examined how social forces shape the place and its inhabitants. About the same time, phenomenologists in geography placed their emphasis on the affective bond between people and their places, making place an almost spiritual force. Regardless of the approach, place remains a core concept in geographic thought. Some of the major thinkers about place are summarized below, acknowledging that this treatment only covers the high points and may occasionally come across as simplistic. Perhaps the most straightforward early definition of place came from Professor John Agnew, who argued that a place is any space that has been made meaningful and includes elements such as location. The fixed map setting on the earth is the location, the where question, often reflecting the descriptive approach. Where on the map is my university and my office, as revealed in the displayed graphic? And then locale. This is the material setting or context for social relations, the setting in which people conduct their lives as men, women, rich, poor, minority, majority, etc., and reflects somewhat the social constructionist approach. The context in the graphic is my campus and the city of Fort Collins. And finally, there is a sense of place. This is the emotional and subjective tie that people have to the setting. In other words, the affective bond, akin to the premise behind the phenomenological approach. In the graphic, I feel attached to my university home and its mascot, the Rams. Go Rams! Agnew is quick to point out that the sense of place is not always local, but can be expressed in terms of regions and nations. Using Agnew's work as a starting point, let's take a more nuanced look at place elements, especially meaning, and some of the dynamics that come to define a place. For the late Professor Ifu Tuan of the University of Minnesota, it was all about the place as a source of meaning. He wrote that meaning flowed from the awareness and visceral connection that emerged from the experience of a particular setting. This experience often led to the feeling of place as a home that satisfies basic biosocial needs and higher aesthetic aspirations. And then there was the power of language, which transforms nature into a place with specific characteristics and understandings. Naming, for example, helps to define the nature of a place, either real or aspirational. The colonizer's planting of a flag in a new territory and naming it, for instance, is an early step in creating a place, perhaps befitting the colonizer's vision of what the place should be seen as, or in other words, maybe attempting to manufacture a meaning. From Tuan's focus on meaning, we turn briefly to the dynamics of place creation and change over time. Professor Alan Praed wrote about places as the expressions of various flows and processes that don't remain the same. Incorporating Giddens' approach to structuration theory, Praed described place as constantly becoming under the influence of local and global institutions, the spatial division of labor, power structures, social structures, individual biographies, and nature, each transforming and being transformed by the other. For Thrift, Lorimer, and many others, becoming involves mainly non-tangible influences. For example, so-called non-representational forces. Their conversation was about, quote, how life takes shape and gains expression in shared experiences, everyday routines, fleeting encounters, embodied movements, precognitive triggers, practical skills, affective intensities, enduring urges, unexceptional interactions, and sensuous dispositions, end quote, according to Lorimer. To frame the theory more simply, Thrift asserted that it is about the geography of what happens. As life takes shape and gains expression, so do the places in which life happens. As indicated in the displayed graphic and its harried character, all variety of non-representational forces may play a role in the places that emerge as part of our lives. Yes, you may be forgiven if you feel like you're being asked to hug smoke. But difficulty in grasping and quantifying these place-defining forces does not make them less real. Not everybody shared Thrift's enthusiasm for the non-representational project, due mainly to its sort of obvious incompleteness. This lack of enthusiasm contributed to the embrace of heterogeneous assemblages that included not only subjective forces but material components to explain the creation and recreation of places. A place may be composed of elements that are human and non-human, organic and inorganic, technical and natural, and work together for a certain time. These elements come together in the emergence or territorialization of an identifiable place. Over time, circumstances may change, leading to deterritorialization, at which time the place is reformed and takes on a new identity. In this process, not all places are created equal. Duff proposed a distinction between thick places and thin places, the former associated with experiences that are deeper, richer, and more absorbing, the latter associated with less meaningful and less memorable moments, creating perhaps a fungible uniformity, as it's sometimes called. Home may be a thick place. A mall fast food hangout may be a thin place. Up to now, our discussion of place has been focused on terrestrial places. Can we extrapolate to social virtual worlds the characteristics of place found in physical spaces? I argue that place, with all of its elements, is just as prevalent in and important to virtual worlds as to physical worlds, though the elements that define a virtual place may be notably different. I argue that the assemblage model offers the greatest explanatory power for understanding virtual places. Let me develop this point with a brief discussion of some of the more salient extrapolations about place from the physical to the virtual world. First, avatars are real. They are fully dimensional geographical agents, to extend Entrican's terminology to virtual worlds that can operate in virtual places and spaces. Without these geographical agents, whether in a virtual or physical space, the concept of place has far less meaning. Second, a virtual place contains the same gathering of heterogeneous elements, human, material, in-world, actual world, local, and non-local entities and influences that create places everywhere. Virtuality, however, creates interesting variations on the theme. Third, materiality offers a case in point. Virtual world materiality is expressed in a pixel medium instead of a world of water, rock, air, and gravity. The message about place from a pixelated materiality differs accordingly. For example, we are gathered today in a room with seats, lights, a carpet, pictures, flowers, and so forth. These accoutrements provide a familiarity that make us feel at home and convey a message about the kind of place this is, a business place or a meeting place. These things are not here for our comfort, unlike in the physical world. Anybody here today finds your seat uncomfortable or even comfortable? I could stand here all day in high heels and never complain. Indeed, materiality in a virtual world, according to Berger, what he referred to as interactional architecture, may have more to do with communication and interaction than anything else, including our comfort. Our virtual material world sends a message to those of us who are present here today about what kind of interaction is to be expected, that is, listening and responding, and how formal it is to be. Not very. In the physical world, these things would still convey a message, but would address human comforts as well. Along the same lines, virtual materiality also has different cause and effect relationships. If a person walks into a wall in the physical world, the next sound you may hear is ouch, or something too profane to announce here. That same wall in a virtual world may look solid, but allow you to walk through unimpeded. Speaking of ouch, try jumping off of a roof in the physical world, or better yet, flying off the roof. Duffy and Stojanovic let us know that processes involved in an assemblage are, quote, determined by the nature of the practices and parts of the assemblage, end quote. Virtual world practices and parts can be different from physical world practices and parts. Next, virtual world places are constantly becoming, in keeping with Pred's narrative. The process of becoming, however, involves both worlds. A virtual world like Second Life contains the rules and provides a technological setting that shape the process of becoming that are missing from or badly distorted in the physical world. But physical world influences remain. An in-world builder, for example, constructs a home that reflects the technological possibilities of the virtual setting. These possibilities include a concocted natural setting, the use of such things as prims for building materials, and a casual relationship with the concept of gravity. The actual world intrudes to the extent that the builder may want to emulate the physical setting in terms of design decisions. Trees that reflect a certain climate, period-specific furnishings, etc. The avatar occupants may introduce, in keeping with Ye's Proteus paradox, the driver's cultural mores and prejudices into the virtual world assemblage. Next, virtual worlds have meaning. Places in virtual worlds can be engaged by the senses and feelings, though the extent to which such is the case will necessarily depend on the physical world's user's relationship with the avatar. Places can be experienced in the manner described by Professor Tuan. Can the typist smell the virtual roses or feel the breeze through the trees? Can the user feel the warmth of the morning sun or the cool breeze from the water? Witness the woman on the screen. If the answer is something approximating a yes, it is hardly a stretch to conclude that the power of virtual place is at work. Along the same lines, how many users perceive a virtual place as home? I mean, really? And what about the power of language in producing meaning? Surely the owners of a sim may be called Paradise Beach would acknowledge the evocative role of such a name. With this background in mind, I submit that we can define place in a social virtual world as real and inhabited by real selves in avatar form, a source of meaning and affect for place occupants and their users, constituted by a gathering of heterogeneous entities and forces, human and material, in-world and actual world, local and non-local, engaged in complex relations with the virtual environment, constantly emerging or becoming, leading to territorialization, deterritorialization, and reterritorialization of places. Add to this definition the probability that our virtual worlds are both thick and thin, with the former producing special attachment to our avatar selves. In summary, the evidence, such as it is, suggests that places in social virtual worlds are real, just as we avatars are real. So now that we have established, at least in my thinking, that places in social virtual worlds are real, how can real virtual world places and the things that virtuality offers be used to enhance the educational experience, especially for people like me, geographers? Learning is increasingly viewed as occurring in pedagogical places. While most discussions of pedagogical places focus on the physical world, it's easy to extend the concept to the virtual world. Indeed, given the pedagogical potential of virtual worlds, we may be forgiven if we think of pedagogical places in virtual worlds as places on steroids. How can we define a virtual world pedagogical place using our definition of virtual places above? Where does the avatar fit in? Does meaning play a role? What about the assemblage of heterogeneous entities and so forces? A recent dissertation by Lee Irving provides a starting point. She argued, and I quote, pedagogical places in virtual worlds encompass a complex layering of embodied identity, modalities of pedagogical creativity, playfulness, and agency, and of dwelling pedagogically, end quote. She added that a virtual world pedagogical place is, and I quote again, a figured world where digital materiality and artifacts shape ways of being and influence ways of feeling in spaces, end quote. Note the similarities between her vision of virtual place and that described by geographers in general, especially the focus on materiality and feeling in spaces. In brief, Irving is describing an assemblage-based approach to understanding a virtual pedagogical place. We may wish, however, to dig deeper into the ways in which virtual reality pedagogical places can be distinguished from physical world pedagogical places, and how these distinctions can produce a meaningful value-added proposition for education in social virtual worlds. Since we are dealing with the learning environment, we will focus less on the questions of meaning and emergence as included in our definition, and more on, first, the role of the avatar, and second, the gathering of heterogeneous entities and forces engaged in complex relations with the virtual environment that define the pedagogical setting. Let's examine first the avatar student in its virtual setting. It's hard to imagine an equivalent entity that educators deal with in the physical world classroom. Yes, in that classroom, we have our starry-eyed daydreamers, those students in their parallel universes, and our checked-out students catching up on game scores on their phones. But we do not deal with fully embodied electronic projections of students remotely situated on the other side of the screen. And I will ignore for the moment all the more philosophical conversations about how our physical world selves are really only masks that conceal our true identities. Yes, we know who is enrolled in our courses thanks to the insistence of university registrars, but we are inclined to see the students as who they present themselves to be. For example, the shy boy from the back of the physical classroom emerges in the virtual place as a chatty and extroverted biker boy with an attitude, or maybe some sort of, who knows, superhero. This is what he and Bailenson explained in their Proteus effect. The Proteus effect is not necessarily bad, and indeed, in my classes, I would encourage students to be someone else, at least temporarily, to explore different identities as part of the virtual world learning process. Yes, they could even try out being a dragon, presenting as a dragon, but I would draw the line at a fire-breathing dragon. The point is that the pedagogical place is defined in part by the persons occupying the place, and the possibilities of a virtual world significantly modify the meaning of the person. On a related note, Irving was quick to point out the importance of the social virtual world as a place to dwell pedagogically, rather than serving simply as a pedagogical tool. It's important to dwell as an academic and to dwell with the students. She wrote that, quote, dwelling in a virtual world through the extended embodiment of their avatar gave academics a keener sense of being there and being with their students, so creating a collegial experience, end quote. Irving is describing the benefit of avatars being physically together and interacting with one another in the same space. the essence of what is usually described as social presence. Schultz and Brooks wrote that social presence provides validations of other avatars' presentations of self, a validation that is owed each other and promotes social interaction to achieve goals. By extension, we can assume that learning goals are included. Indeed, in a recent dissertation, Hardesty built on this argument to describe empirically an association between levels of social presence and phases of knowledge construction. Through social interactions and through social validation, new knowledge construction emerged. I contend that the social presence argument alone sets this type of online learning apart from VR and other video options. On a related note, Irving found in her work that the relationship between the avatar instructor and students was more collegial than experienced in the face-to-face physical setting. She explained this by speculating that the virtual place was more informal, that there's a shift in being as an avatar that promotes greater collegiality, and that the virtual world pedagogical place is more open to creativity and playfulness. Second, let's look at some of the elements that may constitute the gathering of heterogeneous entities and forces that shape the virtual pedagogical place and make the virtual place different from its physical world counterpart. To begin with, as I mentioned above, physics are manufactured. Gravity goes down because we tell it to, except when we don't tell it to. Can't see over the shoulders of the student in front of you? Just hover. Late to class? Fly to it. Why raise your hand? Just raise your body. If the teacher wants to point to a specific item on the giant PowerPoint presentation, but can't reach it, use your airborne body as a pointer. In addition, classroom artifacts in the pedagogical place are not your father's classroom artifacts. Indeed, the teacher itself may be an artifact. Irving speculated how the avatar may serve as an embodied artifact, in that, in her words, quote, it allows the corporeal person to navigate the virtual world and interact with virtual world artifacts so as to experience that world in a certain way, mediated through the avatar, end quote. So perhaps that's a more expansive way of saying that the virtual teacher is a thing in the classroom. So how does that feel, teachers, to be just another thing? I don't know. Maybe we are also just things in the physical classroom as well, but that's an existential question that I will leave for another day. But when we think of artifacts in a virtual pedagogical place, other things probably come to mind first. Some of these things may be small scale in nature, yet more powerful and manageable than the physical world. In addition, they may contain embedded cues that clearly signify pedagogical intent and perceived action, as argued by Irving, which may be the case of the picture on the prim or the scripting of a chair. Here we can extend the logic of Berger and Associates as introduced above regarding interactional architecture to the pedagogical place and its artifacts, with the argument that furniture, or in our case, artifacts, are present not so much to accommodate physical comfort of people, but to send a message about what kind of interaction is expected. In the virtual world pedagogic place, furniture, artifacts, whatever, are more about communicating a message, about pedagogical intent, than would normally be the case, especially given the absence of nonverbal cues in the electronic setting. There is a growing interest in the extent to which these other things, these artifacts that define the pedagogical place, may include animated pedagogical agents, as explained by Kramer, or what perhaps are more commonly referred to as bots or NPCs, non-player characters. Pedagogical agents, according to Kramer, are, quote, autonomously acting entities in immersive settings that are based on artificial intelligence, end quote. They can interact with the student as a tutor or peer. We know how AI is all the buzz these days and has relevance beyond the virtual world pedagogical place, but the AI-infused pedagogical agent seems to fit naturally as an artifact defining the virtual world pedagogical place. Kramer described one study that showed how pedagogical agents improved learning by 1 letter grade compared with reading a textbook. Talk about a transformative entity or force. Perhaps the most significant defining entity or force in the virtual world pedagogical place is that which is contained in the experiential promise offered by three-dimensional immersive models. It may be a supersized object. I will never forget my first encounter with the walkthrough testis that one Second Life teacher scholar set up. Talk about a place, entity, or artifact. Think about what effort such a model would require in the physical world. Or it may be an immersive landscape, such as a theater in the round, or in my case, a representation of the Siberian tundra. Thanks to 3D immersive modeling, the virtual world pedagogical place provides extraordinarily opportunities for situated and/or constructionist learning. Shute and colleagues wrote that, quote, situated learning is an active process that can generate excitement and curiosity in the learner to acquire knowledge by constructing meaning through specific problem-solving scenarios, end quote. They added that this type of immersive learning contributes to a contextualized understanding of instructional content in ways that are often decontextualized in formal learning settings. The constructionist approach promotes the value found in student learning from building his or her own immersive environments, in the process developing an emotional investment that facilitates the learning process. Whether these models make sense in a given pedagogical setting will depend on the academic discipline and goals of the learning experience. But as Deed et al. Pointed out, quote, situation learning is seldom used in formal instruction because creating tacit, relatively unstructured learning in complex real-world settings is difficult, end quote. Aha! One more example of virtual world advantages. In a virtual world pedagogical place, it is still difficult to do this, but far simpler and less costly than in the physical world. Finally, as we contemplate the entities and forces that define the virtual world pedagogical place, we should ask how authentic they should be as physical world representations. We need to acknowledge that for most students, entering a virtual world pedagogical place will be confusing, maybe even off-putting and frightening. Do we need to create a physical world of cognates and strive for a level of authenticity that will address these anxieties? In our virtual classrooms, we typically have chairs, just like we do in this venue today. Once again, do we need chairs? Do we need familiar trappings of physical world classrooms? Do we need classrooms? In each instance, the answer is no, at least not for functional reasons. On a more emotional level, however, the question remains whether, absent these trappings, how would we feel about the pedagogical place? Would students feel out of place somehow? Would they be responding to a 21st century version of Professor Rolf's conversation about the placelessness affecting his world in the 1970s? Would placelessness settle into students in a more avant-garde world of the 21st century? There is mixed scholarly opinion about the extent to which virtual classrooms should reflect authenticity. Irving's research included the finding that there is, quote, a genuine need for an academic's avatar to project the appropriate professional identity. In addition, respondents in her study indicated that it was important to have teacher avatars bear some physical resemblance to the typist. It was important, that is, to recognize a distinction between the instructor seeing him, herself as the avatar and seeing him, herself represented by the avatar. The latter is better. The same issue arose regarding the creation of pedagogical agents. Kramer reported research that indicated no clear evidence that a human-like body had any effect on learning, though other evidence suggested that a human-like body with the ability to produce nonverbal cues would produce a different outcome. So does this meaning that virtual worlds platforms with Lego-like avatars have a pedagogical future? Perhaps, but there's also evidence that instructors who come into the classroom who dress and look like they would in the physical classroom have a sort of a consoling effect on students. Given the time, I'm going to stop right here. I was going to talk about how I would structure a virtual world geography experience, beginning geography. And I started out about how should instructors look as they approach geography students, and that goes into the research I was just reporting on. And then I was going to talk a little bit about the role of social presence and the role of large-scale three-dimensional representative models like the Tundra experience I just I made reference to. So thank you very much. And Marie, questions are to be received in the next phase.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing with us today, especially on such short notice. Yeah, I have captured a lot of the comments that were in the chat. Let me just grab those real quick. But before I do that, I just wanted to say that one of the things that I think that you have shown us today is something that I see in my own classes, and that is that you know, if you compare teaching in a flat environment like Zoom, everybody's camera's off and nobody's talking. But
yeah.
but if you're in a virtual environment, everybody is way more engaged, way more engaged. So this is really important. All right, let's see. So Marley said, dangerous for people with multiple personalities or identities.
I refer that to the psychologist in the room.
And then Belle said, I think they're just talking about schools encouraging students to explore different roles and expressions like theater or creative project. It's not about developing multiple personalities. It's just about understanding perspectives and identity in a broader way.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. And the personality formation process can be important in other ways that are more therapeutic in nature. That that shy boy I was showing you in one of the slides, could find that in a virtual environment, he's less shy. And there is research that supports this type of transformation. So yeah, to some degree, it is sort of identity exploration, identity travel, if you will. In other instances, there is a very meaningful response by the student that can be afforded by the identity possibilities in a virtual world.
Okay, and then Marley says, nevertheless, I contend that anyone who works with students in virtual spaces should have some training in psychology and an understanding of various consequences of choices or instructions.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is actually a discussion that could last a long time. If you have, okay, let's say you do have a dragon that comes to class, and it's not a fire-breathing dragon. Well, I wrote up a list of guidelines for students one time, and I said that when you come to class, you have to be in a way that's not distracting other students or offending other students, and down the list. And if you're a fire-breathing dragon, you're out of the class immediately, because that is generally considered a distraction. And so I think you have to go into the identity part with open eyes. And there's some things you can't allow, but you want to encourage students to explore themselves. I mean, we do live in a physical world made up of personas and masks. What happens if a student is able to look behind the mask a little more in a virtual world?
And then Keeper Baxton says, avatars have no soul, but humans can spread their emotions with others, both in real life and in Second Life. Therefore, we can change how others feel about an environment just by our presence with a body or avatar.
Yes. Well, okay. Yeah, that's right. If I come to class as a dragon, the other people in the class are going to see, that's a dragon. And they're going to respond to me as they would most dragons that they come into contact with, right? That's part of that's part of the whole process of social presence. And as Ian Bailenson said when they talked about the Proteus effect, if you come in as a dragon, you're going to sort of want to act like a dragon. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of identity dynamics going on here that most of our education classes did not train us to deal with.
Okay, so Bell says, even if avatars themselves have no soul, but the emotions and intentions behind them are very real. In virtual spaces, presence still carries weight. How we act, speak, and frame experience can shape how others feel, just like in real life.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was the purpose of my coming to class as a dragon comment. To provide evidence of what he says. It's correct.
Yeah. You're getting lots of kudos in the chat, by the way. Many of the students asked if so Dex is saying, many of the students asked if they feel tired walking or standing for long periods of times and said they do feel tired. Immersive environments can inflict that on people. Right? Like even though you're a virtual avatar in an environment, if you're standing around, you're going to feel more tired than if you're sitting in a chair.
Yes. And if it's cold outside, you go on dress your avatar to respond to the cold or to the heat. And oh, by the way, I'm tired of standing in these heels. So yeah, what you do is that's the part of the linkage from the physical world and into the virtual world, and it's something that's almost reflexive for us. And that says something about the complexity of that avatar user relationship.
Right. And then Lysena said, this is a good place for people with social anxiety.
Yes. I did a mixed methods research project in connection with the book that I wrote several years ago. And I didn't have time today to talk about any of the findings, but talking with students and, avatars in general, probably a third of the comments about the avatar presence addressed in some way a therapeutic benefit that was coming from an avatar existence. Social anxiety, big one, really big one. I'm not a psychologist. I just play one on occasion around my students. But the the effect is real. I can't account for it, but the effect is real, and it's there, and it's cited by independent people countless times.
Yeah, exactly. Damaris says a lot of normal people become shy in virtual worlds too.
Okay, yeah. There are people, especially if they're not comfortable in their own skins in the physical world, the last thing they want to do is don an avatar. And that's especially true with grown-ups, I've discovered. Uh, and sometimes after being in an avatar for a while, that goes away. And I know of one person who's very close to me donned an avatar, and I thought she was going to go into a psychotic break after she got out of the avatar because it just didn't feel right. And so, yeah, being an avatar in itself can be anxiety inducing.
And, and I can tell you that from way back when I was first came into these spaces and I had to do a presentation. Talk about social anxiety, because I'm not pretending to be somebody I'm not, right? I'm just a representation of myself in the real world, and I had just the same anxiety presenting in a virtual world as I do in real life.
Yeah, and uh, when I first came in to Second Life almost 20 years ago now, uh, I, I can't tell you how nervous I was. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I was in one of the reception areas, and another avatar came up to me and asked, "Where are you from?" And I could have said something like, "Well, Louisiana," but instead what I said was, "Not from here," because I looked around and saw it was just totally overwhelming, and there was it took a little while to get over the anxiety, but I did, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. So Marley said we need to remember that we cannot be in virtual if we are not in physical at the same time. So both places will influence the experience. And I feel like that's very true too.
That is true, and that's what the Proteus paradox, as opposed to the Proteus effect, is about. The Proteus paradox says there are some things that we take with us into the virtual world, whether we know it or not, that are going to inform the way we exist as an avatar. And the more extreme examples, if you're a racist in the real world, it's the physical world, there's a good chance you'll take those racist views into your avatar.
Exactly. Okay. Well, let me just, I'm just going to read one more here. Bell says that reminds me of a time when I met a vampire here who spoke and behaved as if he were living in the 1800s, dressed in period clothing, using old expressions, even following social habits from that era. But it didn't feel confusing or dangerous at all. It actually made me understand how virtual spaces allow deep role play and historical immersion, where the identity stays clear, but the experience becomes richer.
Yes, and my question would be, how did you interact with the vampire? I mean, that's rhetorical. I'm not expecting a response, but my guess is there was some degree of you are who you you're who you present yourself to. You are who you present yourself to be, and you respond to others in that same fashion. So there's at least a little bit of a response to a vampire as opposed to a response to a person dressed as a vampire. That's just my guess. Cover your neck. I saw that,
Okay, so we're pretty much at at time, but you guys, we are all, I think, Meryl, you can stay around and continue to answer
Sure.
questions. We've generated a lot here. But before we go, I want to thank everybody today. And then you should be able to find today's lecture here in the chat. And if you want a copy of today's slide, you can get them on the board on the side of the deck, and look for the sign for this presentation. Please also note that we are welcoming new volunteers to come help VWEC, and it's really open to anybody who's interested in teaching and learning in virtual worlds. Help spread the word if you know of somebody who might be interested. Our next expert series will be Stephen Zudfly, who will be presenting Engagement Clinic in Second Life, Lessons for Conversations and Virtual Group Management. That will occur on January 9th at 1:00 p.m. Second Life time. If you want to see all the VWEC events, here is the URL for that in the chat. And in addition, we have a whole bunch of other places that you can go. Also going to be putting that in the chat for all of our social media, as well as Discord. And again, if you are interested in volunteering, please contact Val Librarian Greg, Ellie Pinion, or Sue Moon Magic. Now we can, I'm not 100% sure about this. Are we decked out for continuing this, or do we stay here?
We are. We're decked out.
Okay, so we can move to the deck and continue the conversation. And again, applause, Meryl. That was great.
Thank you, everybody.
Very thought-provoking. And we'll see you guys again in January if you're leaving now.
I'll be a year older. Okay.